Welcome, everybody who's on the line. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you didn't have too many technology glitches on your way. Um, so my name is Sheila Crowley. I'm the founder of the summit, and our mission is to work with women who have been out of the workforce anywhere from 2 months to 25 years, and help them repurpose their purpose and then align that with a professional direction. Um, I am co-hosting this event with my friend and colleague Elise Pettis, who I think is on the line. Elise is the founder of Untied, which is a community for online and in-person community for women going through divorce. Elise describes it as the Thinking Women's Divorce Resource, and it absolutely is. And she and I together share a passion around helping women figure out their value proposition, get their skills back, think about getting their confidence back up so that they can be, fully actualized and bring to market what their inborn skills and talents. So we're really, really excited to have with us today Katie Fiore. I can't believe she joined us. I heard Katie in another webinar, and I was, I sort of stopped in my chair. She brought to the conversation things I'd never considered, and has this passion, absolute activist passion around the future of work for women. So she's not only an impact entrepreneur, she's a design thinker, and she's also the founder of her own organization called Her Future Work. So Katie is going to talk with us for the next 30 to 40 minutes and impart her wisdom around this subject area. And then with time, we're going to be able to field some questions. So while she's talking, if you can put questions in the chat area of your screen, that would be great. I can see them right here. And given the time that we have remaining, I'm happy to try and get them all in at the end. And just so you know, and if you had, came late, this webinar is going to be recorded, so we can send you the recording, and also we can also send you information about her future work, about Untied, and about the summit. So you won't miss out on any of those goodies. So without further ado, here's Katie.
Okay, thank you, Sheila, and thank you, Elise. Let me share my screen. Let's see. Okay, can everyone see that? You can see the presentation? Can you hear me? Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to go through the agenda. So before we dive in, just a little bit about me. As Sheila mentioned, and I was talking a little bit about at the beginning as we were waiting to start. I started my career in general advertising, but spent the bulk of it in digital marketing. And a few years ago, I started noticing a lot of changes that were happening. So on one hand, in my industry, where we did a lot of media buying, performance media, I noticed that increasingly everything that we did was automated. We were using algorithms, we were using predictive models. It was becoming less and less about the strategy and thinking and more about tweaking the model and tweaking the algorithm to get more for less. And I also, at the same time, had a client who was implementing technology so that they could offer, or they could roll out with, humanless transactions. And the goal, what they told Wall Street, was to make for a better consumer experience. But what they told us was, we want to get rid of people. We want to eliminate employees. And that's what this technology will enable them to do. You'll do everything on your phone. They don't need to have people staffed at their different locations. So that was a bit of a wake-up call to me, that an organization would be so verbal about what it was that they were doing. So I started getting concerned about the future of work. And I started reading about it. I started thinking and reading and sort of finding what was out there, what I could do. And the more I read, and there's a ton published on the future of work. So all the big consultancies, Accenture, Deloitte, McKinsey, the World Economic Forum, there's a ton of content out there around it. But what I quickly realized, that it was all about skill sets and industries and regions and nobody was talking about what the future of work, how it would impact women. And women already face gender bias in the workplace, probably at a minimum. There potentially is age discrimination, racial discrimination, all, a whole host of biases that we face. And I started getting really worried that this conversation wasn't happening. And that's sort of what began my journey, was just to start a conversation around the future of work. And it started with a conversation, and then it evolved into, I want to start solving for women. Because ultimately I see this as a time of opportunity. Anytime you see a lot of disruption and a lot of change, you can take advantage of that disruption and create something new and different. And I firmly believe that as women, we need to write our own story. This is an opportunity for us to create a future that works for all of us, because if we don't step up and do it, it will be written for us. And we're probably not going to like it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is the future of work, why it's important, things like that before we get into the questions, just to give everyone sort of a framework of what it is that I'm talking about. So the future of work essentially refers to tasks, repetitive tasks that can be automated. And I think one of the most obvious examples of this is self-checkout, where you're no longer going to a person, a cashier who checks you out. You're doing it yourself, and you're using a scanner and a machine to do it. And we have, as a society, faced a lot of change in the past, historically, major points of change. But the thing that's most different about what's happening now is the rate at which the change is happening. It's exponential. So if any of you remember what life was like before your iPhone and what it's like now, I mean, the iPhone's been around, I think, a little over 10 years now, how profoundly different our worlds are. Instagram didn't exist before. Entire industries, entire categories, entire skill sets didn't exist in the past 10 years. So that's what we're in the middle of doing, experiencing right now. And I think the other thing about the future of work is that it's a bit of a misnomer, because in my opinion, the future of work is already here. We're already starting to see the impact. And I think it actually started quite a while ago. When I think about work and what it typically means to me, and I think to most people, when I think of work, I think of stability, usually from a financial standpoint, but also from a time management standpoint. I think about purpose. You go to work, you believe in what you do, you work hard, you feel good about it, you're fulfilled. Hopefully you're growing, you're learning and developing, and you also have a sense of community. And I think that's all gone now, right? And people now look outward to find their purpose, to find their growth, to find stability. A lot of people that are working more than one job aren't doing it because they want to, they're doing it because they have to. Even if you're a professional and you're thinking, I need an exit strategy because whatever's going on at my work right now, it's not going to last, or it's not going to take me as long as I need it to. So I need a backup plan that will either be my go-to, or that is going to launch me and propel me into what it is that I want to do next. So I think work in general is completely different. And a lot of that is because of financial Wall Street pressures. Companies are public. They need to meet the needs of their shareholders. And it really started around in the 70s when companies started looking toward outsourcing. And more that is happening. Companies are very public about it. They reduce costs by engaging temporary or contract workers. And that's expected to continue to grow. And is another reason that people are now living a different life, whereas before you may have graduated from college, or when I graduated from college, I got a full-time job and I expected to work like that for the rest of my life. My kids, I don't know, that it may not look like, or you may find yourself like I am in the middle of my career, and the full-time thing is no longer really what I want to do. So I start doing things on the side to kind of fulfill myself and ideally turn that into what I really want to do. So why is all of this important? Women, as I mentioned before, really are at risk of being left behind. And we're already seeing this in retail, because retail is really one of the industries that's being most impacted by automation. So from 2016 to 2017, the retail industry lost 60,000 jobs, 50,000 jobs, I'm sorry, and it was driven, when you break it down by gender, by women. Men at the same time frame actually gain jobs. And that's because the types of jobs that are being automated are the types of jobs that women typically do. Sales clerk, cashier, front end type work. The jobs that are being added are warehouse fulfillment, data and analytics, the types of job that men typically do. So, you hear a lot of conversations about saving jobs in this country. To me, they all seem to be male-dominated industry. Retail employs so many people. I don't understand why there isn't more of a panic around what can we do to save these jobs or transition these people into jobs that fulfill the way people shop now. So it's already starting to happen, and I think it's something that we can't sort of sweep under the carpet. And now I love this quote. I just wanted to put this in here because the World Economic Forum publishes a ton around the future of work and what it means for everybody. And I think this quote it's absolutely right. There's never been a time of greater promise or greater peril. We're at a critical moment where things could go really bad really fast, or they could go well. It's probably going to end up being a mix somewhere in the middle, but all of you are very smart women, and I'm sure you're aware a lot of what's going on in terms of wage gaps and how that is growing. A lot of the jobs that are being eliminated are working class. They're working their way up to middle class, so that gap is only going to continue to get wider and wider. And this is kind of where you go back to the whole idea of a social contract, where we, as a population, if we want to maintain a middle class, we need to work to keep making jobs, because it really is small businesses that provide them, small to mid-sized businesses. The larger organizations are providing fewer and fewer jobs. So again, this is a time where all of us can really take advantage of the disruption that's ultimately an opportunity, create a new future for ourselves, and hopefully work to create jobs for others as well. And then before I get into the questions, this is my last slide. Just in all of the work that I've been done and conversations I've had and insights I've been able to glean from different people, I think it really, in order to be successful in the future with the future of work, to me it boils down to three things. The first being the ability to see the possibilities. I think a lot of times people are very focused, and I know I was in my last job, on efficiency and optimization. You're pressured to refine your critical thinking skills. And I think sometimes that means you lose the ability, or it's trained out of you, to think about the possibilities and think about how maybe something you could take a problem and reframe it into an opportunity. So I think that mindset is really important, that when thinking about the future and where you go next, how can you turn this into something positive? How can you turn it into an opportunity? And then everything changes within you once you have that open mindset. The second pillar is continuous learning, which as things change exponentially and rapidly, you need to up your game and keep learning too. And McKinsey and Accenture publish a lot about this, and it's at the CEO level around how CEOs need to keep learning. And it isn't just for CEOs, it's everybody. Everybody needs to do this, but they're worried about who pays their bills, who engages them. Everybody needs to keep reading and learn how to learn. So if you haven't picked up a book, if you haven't taken a class in a very long time, this is an area where you need to get familiar with this again, because it's going to become increasingly important. And then lastly, community. So I think the interesting thing about this is that as technology sort of democratizes access to everything, anyone can submit submit an application or resume to a job, right? Because it's so easy to do that. It's actually harder to get that job now. Why? Because the HR person is getting so many resumes that they now have to employ artificial intelligence to screen all the resumes. So that whereas before, an HR recruiter may look at your resume and read through it and discern that, wow, this person is well-rounded, has a wealth of experience, the AI is only going to see, well, this person says sales, repeatedly throughout the resume. We're actually looking for someone with business development experience, and they're going to kick you to the curb. even though it's essentially the exact same thing. So this is where it becomes more and more important that you are connecting with people on a one-to-one basis. This is how you're going to find your next job. This is how you're going to find your next business development opportunity, your next insight. It's more, as we become, more and more connected digitally, the personal connection is more relevant and more important, because we're just creating a situation where there are more and more people vying for the same thing. So those personal connections are really where you're going to be able to cut through. Okay.
So Katie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. So I forgot to mention that, or maybe I did, that we have some questions pre-planned and that have come from you and come from us, which we were going to walk through with Katie. And again, we'd love to hear you through the chat function. So keep those coming in, and I'll be sure to get them to Katie before we part, hopefully. So just to start, let's start with the first question, right? How far into the future do you anticipate these changes?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. A lot of what the World Economic Forum has posted or published has been the date range 2015 to 2020. So when they talk about the skills that won't carry over or new skills that are needed, they're typically looking at 2020. There's other data being posted around the year 2030. That's actually the most far out that I've seen, but that's only about 10 years away. But when you look at, I was reading something this morning from the World Economic Forum, just trying to refresh my memory and all the statistics. So one of the things they talked about was new skills needed that won't have been necessary in 2015. So and that was from the year 2015 to 2020. So in the year 2020, they're estimating that slightly over 30% of the skills needed for jobs in the year 2020 won't have existed in the year 2015. Wow. So that's a very short period of time, and that's when I mentioned before, the future of work is a misnomer. The future is now. It's here. It really is. It's already happening, which again is also a great opportunity, because the good news is all of you are here thinking about it, getting ahead of it. You have a huge advantage over everyone else who, either who just doesn't see it happening, or isn't interested, or they're so focused on other things that they're not worried about it or not planning around it. So I think this gives everyone on the line a huge leg up.
Which is also maybe onto our next question, which was, how. So I talk a lot about the gig economy with my friends and my women friends. And for those that don't need benefits and that kind of thing, I think the gig economy is actually a huge opportunity, right? Because you can, sell linen from a bunker, and that no one will be wiser, that kind of thing, or certainly work from home and keep the family kind of centered. But maybe you can elaborate on how women specifically, will be impacted by the rising gig economy.
So yeah, I definitely agree with what you said, and I think the critical part is if you don't need benefits, if you don't need, because that's really the problem with the gig economy, is that again, that social contract is being stripped away, where they're providing you work at a lower rate probably than you would have received at a full-time employer, and you're not getting any benefits on top of it. If you're not worried about benefits and things like that, this is really fantastic. And honestly, even if you are worried about benefits, this is still an area of opportunity. If you're looking to transition your career or get back into the workforce, this is a great way to start getting experience. It's a great way to become a business owner. It's a great way to do whatever you wanted to do with pretty much zero risk, other than you're investing your time into something. And I think it's something that women are hopping on because they can do this. This is something that they can actually make happen. It works within their own terms. And I think it's an interesting framing for the future of work, right? When you think about work, it's basically designed around the white male model. The white man from the 40s or the 50s who had the wife who took care of the rest of his life. This is where it's interesting. What if we did reimagine our future? If this type of work works better for women, what do we need to do to prepare ourselves for it? Should we be collectively bargaining to demand healthcare? Should we be collectively bargaining to demand some sort of real pension that we can all buy into so that we can have the flexibility of working these gig jobs, but still have that social safety net that everyone needs? You know, even if you've got a partner who has a good job, you never know anymore. And you always need to be planning. And imagine if you didn't have to worry about that social safety net, the opportunities that would be available to you, because you really could do whatever you wanted. The sky would be the limit. It would be an amazing thing.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about entrepreneurship a little later on, but I think that's an interesting, is that a foolproof way to protect ourselves, with having our own businesses. Maybe that I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah, and I definitely think, especially for women looking to re-enter the workforce, this is a great way to get a little bit of experience and show that you are working, and people are paying you to do it, and have that to put on your resume, or have that to build up your confidence, have that to talk about when you speak to other people. It's going to give you a different energy, a different dynamic, a different presence that I think is really important when you look to land that next full-time job.
Yep. Okay, so on to this is always a good, which jobs do you think will be obsolete and which will be in high demand? I think you just mentioned something along those lines. The 30% won't be with us, in 2020 that we are with today. But do you have a sense of specific jobs that will be obsolete? Yes.
Yes. So essentially, in terms of being eliminated, are jobs where there are repetitive tasks that can be automated. So one of the number one areas are administrative and support type jobs. Again, jobs typically, that's the number one, typically filled by women. So, and those are being replaced with virtual assistants, AI, things like that. Manufacturing and production. So again, even Amazon warehouses, some of I think it's the Alibaba warehouse in China. I saw a video of this where it's just robots going around and one or two people watching them. So a lot, even fulfillment is being automated. And then jobs that are harder to automate are the ones that will be in higher demand. And the other thing that's happening at the same time is we have an aging population. So healthcare is a really big area of ongoing demand for doctors and nurses, home health aides, people that come in and take care of the aging or the infirm, types of things that you definitely can't automate, or at least we can't envision that at this point. Management and business, people are still needed to do sales, to manage teams, to service clients to some degree, and definitely technology, computers, analysis, engineering. People talk a lot about coding, and we had talked about this a little bit. So yes, everybody's like, retraining truckers to code, and everybody wants to take coding classes. A couple things, fantastic, that's great. I wish I knew a little bit more about coding. However, it's not going to be the right fit for everyone. And the other thing to keep in mind is that's a stopgap skill. It won't necessarily take you through to retirement. I've been to a number of panels where the discussion was around how AI eventually will be doing the coding for us. We're not going to need coders. Yes, we're going to need people to train the AI, but those people are going to need PhDs. So I wouldn't discourage anyone from learning how to code. Just don't put all of your eggs in that basket. That's a skill. It's one thing that you could do and have in your back pocket, and maybe will make you a more valuable prospect to an employer, but it's likely not going to solve all of your problems. There's still a lot that you need to think about.
Interesting. So we have healthcare, tech, and
sales. Data, any type of analysis. So whether it be data analysis, research, consumer analysis. So the thing that automation does well, or with data, it consolidates it, and it processes a lot more than people can do on their own. And it can pop off. Here are things that we see. Here's the most number of whatever. Here are the types of people that are most likely to do this. Right. You still need someone to look at all of that and extrapolate. Here's what it means for you. And those jobs are in very high demand. Coming from the media side of things, my last agency was Performance Media Ada. a media agency, data analysts and data engineers, anybody who looked at or touched or worked with data were in extremely high demand. And I think that's a skill that women frequently have. They're very insightful. They have, it kind of backs into a lot of those softer skills around emotional intelligence and cognitive ability that I think women tend, this is totally probably a bias on my part, I think women are good at inferring from data. So if that isn't something that you thought about before, that may be a skill that you have inherently and hadn't really thought about before.
Which is a great segue to our next question. And that was sort of, what would you say, is on the horizon for women who've been out of the workplace for multiple years? I think we've touched on this a little bit, who've been caring for their kids and of course, exercising executive function all the way. And then, kind of with the future work world as you see it.
So I think, and again, this is where being able to envision a positive future becomes really positive, because on one hand, it may seem bleak. I totally appreciate it's really hard for women who've been out of the workplace to re-enter. I know from my own type of work that I do, if you're out of the workforce for 3 months and you come back, everything's different. So it's really, really hard. The flip side of that is that because things are changing so quickly, everybody has to keep up with that. And Sheila, I mentioned this to you before. I was reading an article in Harvard Business Review around innovation and creativity and how it's really important you put a lot of structure around that. And they said, even in terms of looking at your employees, if you have employees who have been around for a long time and they're not keeping up with the new ways or the ability to think differently or the ability to come up with new ideas, you need to get rid of them. So essentially, this is an opportunity for a huge level set where if, yes, you've been out of the workforce, but you've actually done a good job in keeping up because you've taken classes, you've done some gig work, you've formed your own network, you may be in a better position to come in than somebody who's already within an organization, who are now, organizations are now being pressured to make sure they only have people that can keep up with all of the changes. So I think this is potentially a huge opportunity for women to take advantage of their time outside of the workplace, however limited their free time may be, and think about how you're using that and using it to learn something new and practice something new that will put you ahead of the people that are already employed.
I absolutely see that. And it's happened with a number of my clients already, right? They're showing up with so much enthusiasm and so much creative, they're just bursting, right? Because they've been doing one thing for so long that they're ready to do something new, and they exude interest, they exude desire to learn, they exude, right? So I think you're right about that. I've seen it live. Okay. So
I'm sorry, I just want to say one more thing on that too. The other thing that I think is really critical is the power of your network, your community, because as a woman within the community, you're probably surrounding yourself with other women who are similar to you, and you're all trying to help each other out, which is a very powerful thing. People that are consumed with their jobs likely don't have time to maintain or create that type of network. So that's something you should think about too, is how you can leverage that community that you've established. How can you build it up if it's not quite there yet to make that work for you? Because the women, you've all been working, you're powerful, you're strong, you're smart, you're connected. You just need to sort of light a fire to that aspect of what you're doing and start reconnecting and leverage that, because that's going to be very powerful for you too.
Yeah. And particularly when you know what you're looking for, which I think is the big nugget for a lot of people, but that is actually very achievable. I've noticed. Okay. So, a related question, what do you think is the best way to set ourselves up for that kind of success, right? It sounds like education is a piece of that, right? It sounds like building our network is a piece of that. Is there anything else that you'd add to that list?
It's like I said, it's really the 3 pillars: the visioning, the ability to see opportunity, continuous education, and then community or networking. Those are really the most critical elements to success. And just to speak about learning a little bit, although I think it's a question later on, so maybe getting ahead of myself, but there's a ton of online content They're called MOOC, MOOC, Massive Online Open Communities. There's a lot of learning out there that's absolutely free. I'm not suggesting you go to NYU and get your MBA. You don't have to do an extremely expensive course. Find inexpensive ones, start with free ones, find inexpensive ones. This is a great area where, as you mentioned before, if women are trying to figure out what to do next, take a couple different courses in a couple different areas and see what that feels like to you. But I think the more you know, I guess to quote NBC, the more you know. I mean, the more powerful that you're going to be, and the more rounded and relevant you're going to seem to prospective employers. And I think it's really important that women, when talking about trying to negotiate that next position, you go in from a place of confidence and have stories that you can tell. Because, and that's, I think, probably, I would imagine, one of the things that women from outside who've been out of the workforce for a while would struggle with is having those current stories that they can feel excited about. And that's where I think learning can really help get you there quickly.
Yeah. And related to that is sort of the vernacular, right? That they have the language that somebody's on the receiving end can understand, right? That sounds like them. It sounds like their experience as well, 100%.
I know even within digital media, we keep saying the same things, but over the past 15 years, we use different words to talk about them. And I mean, that's a really good point that you keep, nothing's ever really new, but how you say it, I guess, keeps changing.
Sales versus business development, as you mentioned earlier.
Yes, yep.
Okay, so let's keep going. There's a lot in the chat box, so I want to keep going. Okay, so we talked about, I'd asked you, when I have a daughter, she's 17 years old, and I'm looking at her and I'm wondering, what is her view? So much possibility, it's bursting, but I also think, like, by the time she gets to, working age, which is not that far off, maybe 4 or 5 years, professional career track, what do we think it's gonna, how can we help her? How can we help our younger women around us?
So, I also have a 15-year-old daughter, so this is a very relevant question for me as well. I think the one thing I'm trying to do with her is, again, teach her that mindset, sort of an innovation or design thinking framework where you view everything with an open mind, you come up with insights, you come up with ideas, and then you conduct experiments. So I think the inherent sort of pieces in that, again, are being able to frame a challenge properly, envision where you want to go, test, try something out, and then quickly move on. And everything you do, it's with an attitude of learning. So I think those skills for our daughters are really important to help them figure out. I mean, it was hard enough when I went to college to decide a major. I can't even comprehend what it must be like for our kids today to have to pick something when the world around them is changing so frequently. So I think the ability to be flexible and really roll with everything that happens in a positive way, but you always have purpose behind you, I think is really, really important. And the way I would also flip this around a little bit too. Yes, absolutely. We need to help our daughters. We need to help the younger women around us. They can help us. And I don't know that women are really thinking about that, but almost the younger your kids are, the more relevant they are. So in my last company, I was surrounded by millennials. They were all constantly blown away that I knew more artists than they did. I knew more social media trends than they do. And it wasn't because I was doing it. It was because I watched what my daughter is doing, and it's almost like before the young people in the office were the most current people. It's not like that anymore. It's the younger and younger generation. So I would encourage you to engage with the millennial women around you. It's a two-way street. You can share with them your experience and your advice. They can share with you what, from their perspective, is important, and people need to know what they're focused on. And if you're not in an office, mine your kids for that data, because the trends that they're on top of, that's what all marketers, all brands want people to be aware of. And I think that's actually where you're potentially uniquely qualified, is because you have access to what is really hot right now. If you work on anything that touches consumers, it's a very relevant area to be aware of. And again, I can't really say enough how much I've gotten out of mentoring young millennial women. They keep you grounded, they keep you in touch. And I think honestly, the most important thing is they help you internalize your value. When you're giving advice, especially as your mom, because your kids kind of never want to hear it, when you're giving advice to a young professional woman who's so appreciative, who really wants to learn from your experience, it's very gratifying. And I think, again, helps to build up your confidence that I do know a lot. You know, I have done this before, and how great that I'm able to impart that wisdom on someone else. And I think that's something you don't have to be working to do, is to connect with younger women around you. And that may be an interesting partnering area, because there are probably a lot of younger women who've taken time off to have babies and are looking to get back into work. You know, they have different connections. They work at different companies. They know different people. And it's really good to have those networks collide.
I love that. The younger mentor. We talked about that a little bit, right? The dipping down and dipping up, going both ways. Okay, so did we talk about skills? Do we need to go there?
We talked a little bit about skills. So when you, and I'll just be very brief on this, when you think about the future of work and people talk about skills, it's all soft skills. It's all emotional intelligence, problem solving, cognitive ability. I think the overarching big piece of it is the ability to take very complex problems and situations and make them simple. Those types of skills and abilities, building a team, you know, mentoring, soft skills. Yes, and women are, and that's always a counter argument I get from people, is that, well, all the skills of the jobs of the future are the types of skills that women already have. And yes, that's great, but I've never seen a job description asking for emotional intelligence. You know, it just doesn't really work that way. So I think in terms of more hard skills, I think the ability to analyze data, I think the ability to learn new things and demonstrate that you can do that. And I do think the ability to take complex situations and make them more simple in whatever aspect within your job that's relevant is important. And then look at the industries that are hiring. Healthcare, what are the skills within healthcare? Technology, data, what are the skills required around that? So to find skills that are more relevant for you, I would look at the industries that are growing and that you have an interest in, and look at those skills that are required to have those types of jobs.
Right, find what the job descriptions are saying, and then go online and help yourself.
Yes.
You can learn everything on YouTube. It's crazy. But you also, from our last time together, I signed up for a course on social impact, and it was
great,
from UPenn. You know, great professor. It's just amazing. So
and you meet people through those classes. And especially a lot of them are global. I took a class through IDEO, and there were people from I think it was Ford Motors, and people from HP globally, where they mentioned that their HR people wanted them to be more innovative, so they signed them up for these classes. But it was really cool. I mean, there are people from all over the world, from major brands that I never would have connected with otherwise. So even those learning platforms can be a great way to start networking.
That's great. Okay, so we talked about going back to school. So good segue. This idea, there are workshops, there are boot camps, there's online courses that are 4 months long, that are 2 weeks long.
Yeah, I would start with free and work your way up to paid as you become, especially if you're not focused in what you want to do and you just want to experiment. And then start, as you progress, work your way up to the more expensive classes. But there are a ton of options, free, inexpensive. And after, I can put together, like we had talked about, a little resource list that I can share with everybody of different places to take courses and do a lot of the other things that I'm talking about that I'd be happy to share.
We can put that in that follow-up email we were talking about.
Yes. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. And related, one of the questions that's coming up here. Okay, so lastly, before we get to the chat room, we have another 17 minutes. The last question is how these changes kind of impact the gender pay gap, which the statistic you brought the last time I heard this was ridiculous in nature. and then kind of how to approach work, understanding this gender pay gap, and is there any strategy that you would use to perhaps put yourself a little bit ahead of that curve?
Right. So I think the stat that you heard me mention this was recently published, that historically we referred to the pay gap as being women making 79 cents, 80 cents for every dollar that men make. But a new study was just issued that said it's actually 50 cents for every dollar. The gap is much wider. I guess good news is that the gap is closing faster than we thought. I mean, it's significantly bigger than we thought. So the wage gap is real. And I think the thing that women outside of the workforce can do is be educated around what jobs are paying. And don't be afraid to ask for money. Ask for what you're worth. I've read this so many times that men will, in looking at a job description, if they meet something like 4 out of 10 of the requirements they'll apply, women need to see something like 8 of the 10 requirements before they think they're qualified enough to apply. And I've done that to myself too. You're saying no to yourself before you're giving anyone else an opportunity to say no to you, which is ridiculous. So we need to stop that. And I'm never a proponent of rewriting our rules and changing how we behave and act to be like men. But in this case, I think you need to not underestimate your value. And if you're interviewing for a job, it's going well, give them a high number and let them counter. What's wrong with that? Don't lowball, which I think women tend to do. Rather than go in with a number that's too high, they'll go in with a number that's too low because they don't think they deserve it. And I can imagine, especially if you've been out of the workforce for a while, you're probably feeling insecure, maybe feel like you don't have enough value. You need to stop that. And I know it's easier for me to say than it is for you to do, but seriously, it's just a number. Put down a number that you want to make. My husband's always yelling at me, telling me to stop being like that. Like, you need to ask for more money. You need to be more aggressive. And I think it's really, really true. And now in New York, what is the rule? They can't ask you what you were making before. They can only ask you what you want to make. And I would try and be as honest as possible. I mean, don't ask for $200,000 for a $100,000 a year job, but don't be afraid about pushing it up another 5 or 10 grand or whatever you think it is that you're worth, or that the worth is not that you're worth. I'm sorry, that the job is worth and the value that you provide.
Right. Do your research around what that job actually pays and feel confident that you can ask for that. Right.
And don't be afraid to negotiate. I mean, at my last company, I wanted to take classes. They didn't want to pay for it. So I negotiated with them and I said, well, can I do some of the work? Because I had to do 2 WebExes a week to meet with my team during the day. Can I do that during work hours? Or if I have a project I need to finish, can I take a day or 2 during the day to get it done? And they said yes to that. They wouldn't pay me the money, but actually time was more important to me being a working mom. It wasn't the money. I didn't mind paying for that. I really just didn't want to have to spend my entire evening working on a project when instead I could squeeze a little bit into my work day, and they let me do that. So, think about what's really important to you and try and negotiate around that.
My last job, I worked 2 days and I had to ask for it and I had to, defend my life against it, but it was so worth it. All right. Okay, listen. So we have some really interesting questions in the chat room. Are you ready for those?
I'm ready.
Okay, so let's see. First, it's interesting to hear that you talk about this issue from a large company perspective. With what you know, would you recommend someone coming back into the workforce even try to apply to a big company? It just seems with these changes, it's even harder.
Good question. I would say yes, and here's why. A lot of companies have a woman problem. And they're especially the more technical companies where they're going out of their way to bring on board more women. A lot of them also are finding that, and this also goes a lot with the big companies, they have a brain drain of women who leave the workforce after a while. And the companies get mad because they feel like they've spent a lot of time and money developing these women, and then they leave the workforce, which I think is a whole other issue. They're not really asking the right questions around what can we do to keep these women here and engaged, but they're probably looking to recoup a lot of that talent, especially for more senior women. So yeah, I think I definitely wouldn't cross it off my list. I think you may have more flexibility with a mid to smaller size company where you're not encountering as much artificial intelligence screening. You're actually connecting with real people. But having said that, like I said, a lot of big companies have a woman problem and they're looking to correct it and they want to hire more women. You might be doing them a favor.
It reminds me, Katie, we have to also share that site that you sent to me, right? Which is that ability to screen for what the job description is and what the resume is, and then
Yes.
get the word. I mean, it was amazing syncing the words so that you get past the first level of the AI. Right?
Yes. Yeah, I will
include that. Right?
Yeah, I will share that with everybody. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so can you offer a good example of a small company or a woman at a job turning change into possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I can. Like, I get from personal experience. I can give you an example that happened to me, where at my last company, about a year into my job, my role changed, and I was told, and basically I was being replaced. The requirements of my job changed. I was told that I didn't have enough of the right experience for what was needed. So instead, they wanted me to focus on these special initiatives that I had been working on. And so I kind of took that home and I thought about it. And I thought about how the special initiatives that I was working on actually was a lot more interesting than my actual job itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about how we really should be giving that more focus. It would give us a point of differentiation as an agency if we were to take that and promote it. So I went in and talked to my general manager and I said, look, if we're going to do this, let's do it big. Let's change my job completely and let me focus on this and let me blow it up and turn it into a line of service and turn this into a product and something that we sell into clients and that we pitch to everybody, and it helps us differentiate ourselves in a very crowded marketplace. And it was approved. He let me do that. And I totally changed my job. So that was an example of where I took something that was really a horrible experience and turned it into an opportunity, not only for myself, but for my company.
Right.
And I think that goes to the visioning. Again, like looking at a situation, it seemed really dire. I was basically getting fired and allowed to remain. And work on these projects. And I just took it. I was like, I knew what I was doing was valuable and it was the right thing to do. And I pitched it and they approved it.
I think, yeah, right. But always with the, value for yourself and value for the company, right? Because
Yes.
You're not going to get anywhere without offering that value to them. Yeah. Because we also talk a lot about like do what you want, right, and the money will follow, all that kind of stuff. I think there is do what you want and make sure that you have the value proposition for the
absolutely yes
you're working with. So just think about that. Okay, I've been out of the workforce for a while due to raising kids. Do you suggest taking any position with my industry or waiting until the right fit comes along?
So I guess that's really up to you and what you're comfortable with doing. Taking any position may give you a leg up because you're within and you may have access to other jobs and opportunities, but it also might pigeonhole you. And if the work isn't interesting and relevant, it may be really frustrating and unfulfilling. More and more companies are doing, and you may have the right terminology for it, Sheila, but there's sort of the back to work internships. Returnships, yes. So, I mean, I would maybe explore that, or if there's a company that you want to work for and doesn't offer that, maybe pitch that to them. Yeah. The other alternative would be to use something like a Mom Project or Upwork or Second Shift to start getting gig work around what you want to do so you can start getting paid and doing the right level of work for you. And maybe take that and parlay that into a full-time position. Sometimes, gig work can be good because sometimes you can turn it into a full-time job if it's the right type of project.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's actually, and I definitely have resources around this too, but there's one question, are there particular agencies that you can recommend to start gig work, and what about Upwork? And I think we'd agree Upwork is a great place to start. There's also like flex jobs, there's like Hire My Mom, there's a ton of mom centric kinds of sites now. I know, you know, Second Shift and Après, I think were the first that came out strong on, you know, design and finance.
Yeah, I think I've had in my experience, based on my background, I haven't had any luck with Upwork, but they do seem like they have the most out there.
Yeah.
The Second Shifts, to me, has the most high quality jobs. There are fewer of them, but at least for my marketing experience, they have like real, they have fractional marketing CMOs, things like that. They're real tangible jobs. And the Mom Project is another one I recently came across, and they seem like they have some decent things. So, you know, they all take a lot of time. You have to sit there and fill out your profile and all of that. You know, it takes like a solid day or afternoon to complete them, but I would play around with signing up for as many as you can and get a sense for where am I meeting, who has the right kinds of projects, where am I meeting the right types of connections.
Okay, so we'll send some of our agency ideas
Mm-hmm.
along with yeah, I think that's always helpful. And to feel like you're, you know, on the offensive and looking, you know, you're fishing for them versus they fishing for you. Let's see. Okay. Where can we find some projections about skills that will be valued 5 years from now? Are there websites we should be regularly reading?
Yeah, so the World Economic Forum publishes a lot around that, and they have a jobs study. So you can just Google World Economic Forum jobs report, and they list all of that. I think they're one of the best sources. They do everything by region. Otherwise, you know, again, organizations like Accenture, McKinsey, Deloitte, they all publish. They all have predictions. Some of them are good. A lot of times it's with a lens. They have a lens. You know, they work with certain types of organizations. They work with certain types of people. So all of their predictions are with that lens. They publish a lot around, don't worry about the future work. It's going to be great because net, they're going to be a ton new jobs. And that's true. And from their perspective, that probably makes sense. But if you think about it, you know, I sat in a presentation for Mary Meeker last spring, and she did it around sort of the state of the internet. At the end, she talked about the future work. And she basically said, I'm not worried about the future work because of this slide. And she showed this slide that had steam engine engineers and airline pilots. And it showed how as steam engine engineers went down, the steam engine travel went down and flights started taking off, the pilots, you know, there were more and more pilots. And she said at the end of this period, there were just as many jobs as at the beginning. It was ridiculous to me because you don't go from driving a steam engine to becoming an airline pilot. Those are totally new jobs, totally new skills. That's great. But what happens to all the people who used to drive the trains? And I think that's the critical part about the future of work is, yes, we're going to end up with more jobs. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be this huge period of transition. And unless we're actively working to get people reskilled or figure out new ways of working for everybody, creating jobs and creating opportunity, there will be no job for them in the future. And those are the people that I'm most worried about.
That might be a great place to wind down. I think we've gotten to all the questions. And I guess we have some comments. For example, and then we'll close out. Totally agree about listening to your kids to get the pulse of where things are going. I love that. Please send over your agencies. I agree. Women can be better equipped to adapt to new environments, adopt new skills. After all, that's exactly what motherhood demands. So New Belgium brewery sold her business to employees. More of this should be done to empower employees. Yeah, I think you mentioned the collective, right? Healthcare.
Yes.
And I think we've covered it. Great.
Excellent.
So Katie.
Thank you. This is fun.
Thank you so much
for
joining us. I really, really appreciate it. I know the audience says there's a lot of activity on the chat box. We have our marching orders to provide the resources that, we've touched on here a little bit. And we'll look forward to our next webinar to be determined. And hopefully we'll get Katie out more. I think right? You like doing these kinds of talks. So if anyone else would like to invite her, I think she'll join you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sheila, for including me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks everybody so much for coming. And again, you have, we'll be sending out an email so you can ask any kind of question or seek any kind of resource through email. Okay? Thanks so much again, everybody.
Bye.
And until next time, talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.